ace king plus, and other strong hands, even like tens plus and ace jack plus or whatever, is going to overcompensate the money I lose on my weak hands when he's defending 40% or more of his range. So I think it often is the best strategy. The times where it probably would be a better strategy to fold the bottom 20% of your range or so is when the player is so bad that no matter what range you're opening on the button, he's over defending. So even if you only open 50% of hands or something like that, he's still defending, say, 50 or 60% of his big blind range. In that case, you probably want to tighten up to like 75 or 80% from the button, uh, because he's just not folding often enough. Even in that case, though, it's possible that he plays so bad post flop um, that you could raise any two and make up for it post flop. So anyways, on the table on the right here, flop bottom pair and check behind for pot control, and to induce some bluffs. And on the turn, it's a very close decision, I think, between calling and folding. Or even, I guess, raising is actually an option as well, as kind of a weak semi-bluff. But I decided to just call, given that I had the gut shot, and I think it's a pretty suspect call. The more I think about it, actually, I think raising actually might have been a pretty good play. But I chose to call and just fold river. Hand on the left is also somewhat interesting here. I go for the check raise on the turn, which I'm not sure at this point if it's entirely a good play, because I'm really not sure what hands he's checking behind. So far he's c-betted 86% of flops, and this flop in particular is very dry. So I'm really not sure exactly what hands he's checking back on this flop. So I just kind of go for a kind of default play of check raising my very strong hands on the turn, and he does not oblige. So I lead the river, which I'm also not sure if that's the best play, given that he definitely could show up with ace-x on the river a fair amount, and I'd want to be check raising that river for value. So I'm really not sure. On the right is the first time I lead in the match, and although I don't think I do a very good job of it this match, one thing to consider when you're playing heads up is early on in the match you might want to try, even if the other player is c-betting a lot, you might want to try donking out a few times to see how they react, because sometimes you'll find that your opponent reacts very, very poorly to donk bets, meaning that either they fold way too often, which is less common, or they spaz out versus them, which is more common. And when they do react very, very poorly, oftentimes it'll be a better strategy to start donk betting into them a lot than to check to them a lot, even if they c-bet very often. But most of the time, if a player is c-betting a lot, it is better to just check to them pretty much every single time. But it is important early on in the match to try to get as much information as possible, and that's just another way of doing so. And I actually don't do that very much in this match. I wish I had, but I just wasn't thinking about it enough, I guess. Stuff like that happens, I guess. So yeah, it's something to consider. You notice my re-raise size is pretty large. Part of that is because we're deep, but I've actually been fooling around with that re-raise size when I'm just regular 100x deep as well, and I think it works pretty well. I don't have enough experience with it to say for sure if it's better for me than re-raising to 10 or 11 big blinds, but I actually think there's a lot of things about it that work out good, but I won't get into that yet because, like I said, I don't have much experience with it, so I'm not exactly sure if what I say about it will be correct. this queen jack hand. He actually sits out for a second. He's coming back though. This queen jack hand on the flop. I have you know, 2 overs and a gut shot. Very very strong hand. Or very strong draw, I should say. And definitely worth c-betting the flop. And but on the turn, I feel like I have very very low fold equity versus range when a 5 comes completing the rainbow. So I just opt to try to realize my equity and check behind, and obviously hitting the nuts is nice, and I have to choose a raise size, and my raise size here is kind of a psychological thing. I raised to $12.5, which is, $9.5 more, and the reason I did that instead of raising to, say, 13, which would be $10 more, is I find, raising to, it's kind of hard to do this at 50, to explain this at 50NL, but say we're at 2-4 and I'm on the same spot and I'm raising to $100. I have to choose between raising to $100 or raising to, like, say, 90. I find 90 gets called way more often, when you're raising like $90 more instead of $100 more, just because the number has less digits in it. It has one less digit, and I find, especially with fish, that they call that a lot more often than if it's a 3-digit number. So in this case, $10 would be, I suppose 10 might even be less at 50NL since there's no cents. So maybe I screwed it up there, but that was my basic thinking at least, and I think you guys can apply that maybe better than I did in that particular situation. But I found that to work pretty well, especially versus fish and even versus regulars. So this guy actually sits out here, but I explained to him that it's a video, and he decides that he'll sit back in. So that was nice of him. I think he might be a Lego member. I'm not really sure. So if he's watching this, you actually played pretty well this match. I thought you played pretty strong. So from here on out, though, he knows that it's a video. But I don't think his play really changed at all. So Jack 10 off is one of those hands again that's just kind of a middling hand that I really like to flat call as opposed to re-raise. And Ace 10 off, I think in a lot of matches can be re-raised for value, but at this point I didn't really feel like that. And same thing on the flop. I think it's certainly viable to check raise this flop with Ace 10, but I do like to have some strong hands in my flop check calling range. And Ace 10 certainly qualifies as that on this board. So I do like to check call, and I'm basically going to check call any turn, any river in this situation. He goes on and obliges me by bluffing the turn, but not the river, I guess. So yeah, I mean, I think for balance purposes and really just for the optimality of the specific hand, I think